Thank you so much, Tyson. So hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marceline Boyd. I teach in the Ancient Greek and Roman Studies program in the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. Welcome to our fall lecture. I am especially honored to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Deborah Trusty from the University of Iowa this evening. But before I get down to the formalities of that, I have a few thank yous and some shameless plugs to make. So I beg your pardon for that. First, I want to draw your attention to Ancient Greek and Roman Studies co-sponsor in this talk, Game Studies, the Game Studies program. Big shout out to them. We are so excited to have had the chance to collaborate with you on this and bringing this event to the UD community. So thank you, Game Studies colleagues, for your support. In the Game Studies vein, I want to plug a class that our own Dr. Tyson Sukava is teaching in spring 2022. This is going to be in LLCU 330. Is that correct, Tyson?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's
yes.
LLCU 330.
LLCU 330. And the title you want to look for is called Games of Antiquity. So everybody look out for that, and that'll be an exciting course coming up that kind of touches on precisely the topic of our talk tonight. Third, I'd like to recognize my colleagues in Ancient Greek and Roman Studies, Dr. Sukava. Sorry about that, the baby's making little noises. Dr. Sukava and Dr. Laird for all the hard work they put into bringing this talk to fruition in the last month. While I haven't been able to be on campus. So thank you for that. And then finally to our DLL staff and to our chair, Dr. Ray, for their support as well for this event. So now, why is it my special honor to bring you, to introduce tonight's speaker? That's because I've had the pleasure of knowing and working alongside Deb for 12 years. Deb, I counted it up, 12 years. We're getting up there. And in a moment, I'm going to offer highlights of Deb's career and many accomplishments, as you are used to hearing before these talks. But allow me beforehand just to say that Deb is one of those rare creatures who, though trained as a classical archaeologist, her interest and knowledge in antiquity is expansive. And as I know firsthand, impressive, very impressive. So I'm really glad to have the chance to invite her here this semester. Sorry, as I get tongue-tied.
Recording in progress.
So thank you so much, Deb, for coming. So now on to the more formal introduction, and I'll only take a moment more of your time. Dr. Trusty holds degrees in archaeology from the University of Evansville and an MA and PhD in classical archaeology from Florida State University. She specializes in Bronze Age Greek archaeology and material culture, and cooking ware in particular, and its implication for early state political economies. She has co-edited a volume entitled From Cooking Vessels to Cultural Practices in the Late Bronze Age Aegean. She also has extensive experience in the field, right, as an archaeologist. She lived in Greece for 2 years, has excavated at sites such as Mycenae, yes, and that is the Mycenae, and has participated in survey projects in the Argolid and its environs. She has received grants from the National Science Foundation for her dissertation research. She is currently Director of Undergraduate Studies and lecturer at the University of Iowa's Classics Department, where she teaches a wide array of classes ranging from archaeology to film to language and literature courses, and has even led study abroad trips to Athens. The topic of her talk this evening, Playing in the Past, Playing, Streaming, and Teaching with Assassins, Creed Odyssey, brings together her interests in many of those areas, in classics and archaeology and gaming. She has experience, as we will soon find out, using video games in her teaching and runs a Twitch channel, which I will include in one moment in the chat for you all if you'd like to follow her. We are thrilled to host Deb here tonight, so please join me in giving her a very warm blue hen welcome to our virtual podium, everybody. And thanks to you all for coming.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Marcy. I can't believe it's been 12 years. That does make me feel very old. I'm teaching currently a Greek archaeology class, and I found my notes from my undergrad years, and it was exactly 20 years ago. And that also makes me feel really old, so All right, but I'm going to share my screen. Oh, wait, it says host disabled participant screening. Sorry, we had this all planned out and everything, and it was beautiful, and... Yes, Greek archaeology class represent. I am currently also, just an FYI, on Twitch at the same time that I'm doing this. So this is a simultaneous stream. We'll see if it works. Hopefully it does. Here we go. Alright, so hopefully you guys can see that screen. Can you see that screen, y'all? Twitch people, I'm not talking to you. Alright, here we go. Great, thank you guys. I see you are very acquainted with the thumbs up and all the emojis and all the things that Zoom has brought us. So, wonderful. Hello and hello everybody. Thank you again for this. And before I get started, I want to thank Dr. Marcy Boyd, Dr. Tyson Sukova, and Dr. Peg Laird for this invitation and allowing me to give this talk at the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at the University of Delaware. It's really an honor to be asked to speak, and I'm excited to see where the Delaware Game Studies program goes, because I would love to have something like that at Iowa, that's for sure. So I'm going to start today by talking about how I'm going to organize this talk. The first point is that I want to talk about how this game is of value in 3 aspects of my life. One, as a casual gamer, it is very casual. My gaming is not a frequent thing. I do not compete. I'm not that great. 2, as a classical archaeologist, I'm okay at that. So, okay. And then 3, as a university lecturer, which is by far a dream job for me. And I've enjoyed being here at the University of Iowa for, this is my 5th year. So it's been a really great experience so far. But I'm going to show you how this game has affected me, both in the way I teach, and in a lot of different ways. Alright, so first let's start with the casual gamer. And if you don't know Assassin's Creed or Assassin's Creed Odyssey in particular, that's fine. I'm going to give you guys just a rundown of it. I don't expect you to know any of this stuff. So here's just a little bit about the history of the game. It was released, so Assassin's Creed Odyssey itself was released in 2018. It's a single player... There we go. It's a single-player, open-world, action role-playing game. And if none of that makes sense to you, it's okay. But the great thing about it is that it is cross-platforms, or you can play it on many different platforms. Sorry, all of my animals are attacking me. It's available on PC, on Xbox One, on PS4, and Nintendo Switch. So as an instructor especially, it makes it much more easy to access for all of my students, as opposed to forcing them to buy a single console, which I would never ask people to do. Now, this game in particular, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, is the 11th major installment or chapter in the Assassin's Creed series. And it is, of all the, there's also like a lot of minor installments. And so within the, if we add the minor installments to that, it's the 21st, I think. And it's not even the most recent, because Assassin's Creed Valhalla came out shortly after this one. If you know Ubisoft at all, they like to pump out the games one year after another, after another, after another. Great. But it's hard to stay relevant when they work so fast. How fast do they work? This fast. Assassin's Creed, the original game, the first game, came out in 2007 when I started my PhD. It came out then, and it's a really fascinating game, in my opinion, for several reasons. The first Assassin's Creed, again, like I said, came out in 2007. And one thing is that, in a nutshell, to explain this game, if there's a way to, there's basically an ongoing battle between the Templars and the Assassins. That's the basic gist of it. But this battle's been going on for millennia. You would think that the Templars are the good ones and the Assassins are the bad ones. Nope, it's the exact opposite. The Templars are the bad ones, and you, in many different forms, are an assassin. However, it takes place in the modern day. And so how do we time travel in this game, right? The way that they do that is it makes use of a modern fictitious device that they've made up called the Animus, which already tells you then that it's got classics oriented in it immediately, because animus is the Latin word for soul, or spirit. And so we've got this going on already from the beginning. The Animus in the game is a VR device, basically, that reads the characters, the characters' ancestors' genetic memory, in their DNA, basically. So you take a little bit of DNA from someone, and you've got all their memories and all their ancestors' memories all programmed and preserved in there. It's an interesting concept, but it by far works well because it helps explain an issue that happens in video games that try and represent the historical past, where the player has to rewrite history, almost, and that becomes an issue for players because they're like, well, should I play this close to history or should I not? Well, the great thing about Assassin's Creed Odyssey is you can't rewrite history because you're already in the future, and the Animus is designed to basically kick you out if you desynchronize, meaning, like, I remember one of my first memories with this game was, like, Ezio wouldn't kill people, and you get kicked out of the game. You get kicked out because Ezio wouldn't kill people. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Ezio would kill people, but okay, thanks, and so then you have to start over again. So in gaming, in historical with gaming games that are set in the historical past, that's always an issue of, well, am I redoing the past? Am I recreating the past? Like, and that's what's great about, I think, the Assassin's Creed series is they've fixed that problem by inventing their own solution to it. So to continue, in the first Assassin's Creed, your character is a descendant of a man named Ezio. And you find out that you basically are trying to find these objects that are hidden in the past. Your current character is trying to find them. The modern character is trying to find in the past where these objects are. So your job is to find the location of these things that will aid the modern assassins in their quest to defeat the Templars. And that's the first one. Alright, so there are 12 of these, right, that continue on the story. So you have modern characters going through VR. They can't change the past. And it's an interesting concept throughout. So then why is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I'm just going to call ACO from here on, why is ACO so unique? It's the 11th chapter, basically. How can something that's the 11th chapter be unique, right? And so one way is, first off, it's set entirely in ancient Greece. Other games have been in the other version, or the other chapters, I guess, have been in Italy, in Egypt, France, England, United States, and now most recently with Valhalla in Norway. So you've got all these different places, different time periods, all united under a battle between the assassins and the Templars for these ancient objects. But ACO is, again, set entirely in Greece, and it is the oldest chronologically so far. And I say so far because, again, watch, as soon as I go to bed tonight, they'll announce something else that's even earlier, which, great, do it, Ubisoft, I'm there. But it's the oldest chronologically so far. It is set during the Peloponnesian War. Now, the 10th chapter is Assassin's Creed Origins. And when that one came out in 2017, I was very, very depressed for about a week because Origins to me says that this is as far back in time as they're going to go. And it's not set in ancient Egypt. It's set in, like, ancient Egypt. It's set in Roman Egypt. in the 40s BCE. You meet Caesar. Like, there. So it's a really weird and interesting take on Egypt. You see it from the Roman perspective. And I was bummed because I was like, well, as a Hellenist, as someone who studies Greek archaeology, does that mean it's over and I'm never going to see an ancient Greece? But then lo and behold, I remember vividly, actually, when the trailer came out on E3, my husband and I were watching, and I was just jumping around the room because I was like, that's not Roman Greece. That's not Roman Greece at all. Oh my gosh, this is Peloponnesian War! And I got so excited, and it was by far one of the greatest moments for me. But even better, though, was finding out that this is the first installment where you get to choose, the player gets to choose the gender of the protagonist. Are you going to play as a woman, or are you going to play as a man? And what's interesting to me, and I only found this out in the past couple of months, is that apparently the plan was to just have only one option. You didn't get to choose, and it was going to be the female. The female was going to be the lead, which is fascinating to me, and would have been very cool, but apparently this didn't jive well with upper management, and so they added the option to play as a male as well if you wanted to. And so you can play as one of two characters, Alexios or Cassandra. And so let's just watch together the Assassin's Creed trailer, just so you can kind of see what's going on and the craziness. So here we go. I'll mute myself so that you can watch this.
My son, you're old enough now. My father's spear holds a certain burden, but you're ready. It carries with it a long line of power. Leonidas. He was Sparta's last true hero. The same blood courses through your veins, but it isn't enough to make you unite the people of Greece. For that, you will need courage. For Sparta! Cunning. Compassion. And commitment. The gods will not always be with you. Embrace this journey, my child, as this is your Odyssey.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey, available October 5th.
Wow, it was, yeah, not long ago. I love that little, like, the kick off the side of the mountain, because it calls to the 300, in my opinion, the movie The 300. And the crossover between movies and video games is really intense, and I think is one of these aspects that I'll talk about, that just shows you how Hollywood movies and video games, or how Hollywood-esque video games have to be in order to be entertaining. And so I'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's the plot of ACO. You play as either Alexios or Cassandra, Either way, you are a mercenary, a mystios during the Peloponnesian War. Yes, there were no female mercenaries in the Peloponnesian War, but go with it. You know, some suspension of disbelief is necessary here. Either way, you are the grandchild of Leonidas. This is the famous Leonidas who fought at the Battle of Thermopylae and died, hence the 300 mention with the kick there. The only thing they don't say is this is Sparta, but that's fine. And basically what happens is you are, again, a mercenary. You're sent on this job to kill a guy, and lo and behold, that guy turns out to be your father, or the guy that you called father, I should say. And the guy that you called father reveals that he is not your biological father. And now you've got to start, now you go on a personal quest to discover your true origins. It's very hero's quest moment. If you think of like Joseph Campbell and the call to the adventure, you've got this full thing here if you know that part of mythology, at least with the hero's quest or a hero's journey. It follows this very well, and I think it's a good homage to that. Not only is it set in the historical time during a historical conflict between Athens and Sparta, but additionally, you team up with historical characters. Herodotus, Pericles, Aspasia. You team up with these people in order to investigate and prevent the actions of this cult that is an early Templar cult, basically, called the Cult of Cosmos. It didn't really exist, guys. It's okay. It's one of those things that they're making up, just like the Animus. I get students that ask me that occasionally, that they're like, is there a Cult of Cosmos? I'm like, no, it's okay. So this cult is controlling and basically manipulating artifacts that have the ability to influence and control people's minds, actions, thoughts, and those things. So you now need to stop the Cult of Cosmos, which, as it lo and behold has turned out and done, has messed up and is taking over the Delphic Oracle and is manipulating the Delphic Oracle, which is something we actually know, like, happened. The manipulation of the Delphic Oracle is an actual historical thing, so I love that they built that into this. And it's just a fascinating thing to me to, as a player, get to walk into the Temple of Apollo and see Pythia, and yeah, it's just kind of a dream come true, honestly. In addition to doing those things, you also get to reenact the Battle of Thermopylae at the very beginning. They have you're basically dream traveling into your grandfather, and you play as Leonidas at the Battle of Thermopylae just to like orient you and understand how the controls work. But it's not like, it's a low quest sort of thing just to get you, you know, familiar with the controls. You also, though, participate in the Battle of Pylos, which we know happened in 425 BCE, and the Battle of Amphipolis, which happened in 422. So these are, like, no one's heard, no one outside of classics really hears about the Battle of Pylos or the Battle of Amphipolis. You definitely hear about the Battle of Thermopylae, but it's great to have these lesser-known historical events that were very pivotal ones, especially the Battle of Pylos and Amphipolis, featured in this game. Alright, so that's just a little bit as the casual gamer, just so you know where I'm coming from there. But as an archaeologist in Greece, and as Dr. Sukova said, I excavated at Mycenae. I used to live in Greece for 2 years, as Dr. Boyd said. And I was conducting research for my PhD there, so I feel like I'm pretty familiar with a lot of these places. So it's very cool to get to travel to them in the game. And this game is a treat for me, really, to see how the things that I had been recreating in my own head came to life. It wasn't just drawings in and computer, drafted recreations that were in journals. It's now in something that's in my home and on my TV and in my hand that I can actually experience. And I loved that opportunity for sure. So just so you know, though, Assassin's Creed Odyssey has, in general, has always been rooted, or Assassin's Creed, sorry, has been rooted in some aspect of the historical world from almost the beginning. Like I said, the Animus is one aspect, but also in AC2, which came out in 2009, they introduced the origin of those objects that control the human mind and actions and thoughts. And these objects are from a pre-Homo sapien, ultra-advanced humanoid race called the Isu. And the three leaders of the Isu that you see here, lo and behold, are named Juno, Minerva, and Jupiter. The Capitoline Triad of the Romans, which is just also a fascinating thing to me. Juno turns out to be bad in general, and lo and behold, if you knew your mythology, you knew that was going to happen ahead of time anyway. Minerva is, of course, the Roman version of Athena. Jupiter is the Roman version of the Greek god Zeus. And Jupiter does act like the leader of the three. Minerva does plan and tries to be a helpful goddess. And so it very much features this way. But they explain it as this was a pre-Homo sapien race that lived on Earth. And kind of became immortalized and became gods, which is another fascinating thing to me, because that's like rationalization of mythology that we see when we study myths, as we have a lot of ancient authors that are like, well, some people say that this person was a god, when really it was just a human that did something extraordinary. Hestia wasn't really a goddess, she was just a woman that invented houses, and we've now immortalized her into a god. That's an actual thing that someone had said in ancient Greek text. And it's interesting. I don't think a woman named Hestia invented houses. I feel like it's probably a little bit of a stretch, but that kind of thing is here, and that relationship and idea is here in Assassin's Creed Odyssey as well. So they've rooted this game in classics from the very beginning, whether they knew they were going to do that or not. But enough about the Isu, since they're not terribly important to this talk. Instead, I would like to talk about the game that came before. Why am I talking about this game? This game, Assassin's Creed Origins, which came out just the year before, like I said, is one that made a lot of interesting strides. First, it went back further than all the others before it, and then Assassin's Creed Odyssey goes back further than that. It goes back to the 40s BCE, and you have those encounters with historical people like Cleopatra, Pompey, Julius Caesar, Brutus, and many more. And they, in order to create this game, had to consult with Egyptologists, historians, archaeologists. They actually talked to these people, had them as consultants, and realized that there was such a large amount of the game that they had been researching for the game that they should research for that they could do something more with. And what that something more was the Discovery Tour. The Discovery Tour was released in 2018 as DLC, or downloadable content, for Assassin's Creed Origins. And so it was seen as an add-on. The reason they created this, though, is because as soon as Assassin's Creed Origins came out, they were getting emails, requests from teachers in the classroom saying, is there some way I can use this in my class? And lo and behold, this was born, the Discovery Tour. So it looks a little bit like this. Here's just a few screenshots. It's a free play mode, basically. You don't get any of the narrative of the game. There's no combat. You can't even hit people. You can't kick people. That was one of the first things my students actually observed is when we were playing together. Is they were like, wait, I can't kill people. I was like, well, we're in school, so no. And so it's oriented very clearly. My dog is joining us, sorry. It's oriented very clearly for classroom use. It's got thematic tours that are set around archaeological evidence and research, and they just have this interesting tone to them. So I'm going to let it talk for itself for a little bit, because I really like how they described why they did what they did with this, and how they made this become basically like a virtual reality museum set in the past and fully interactive for the player. So I'm going to let them talk to you.
In Assassin's Creed, traditionally, there is, yes, an action component, which is very important, but there is also a very contemplative aspect.
In the Discovery Tour, we really wanted to focus the main experience on discovering and learning.
And all of a sudden, you're not in the game anymore. You're just in Egypt, enjoying it, and looking at the world like never before.
Started off in 2014. A lot of professors were contacting us saying, hey, you know what? It would be amazing if you could do a dedicated mode for us so that we could use that into classrooms. It's been on our mind ever since. We were thinking like, all right, how can we make the game different? Something that would be interesting for students, but also that would be interesting for our players.
The idea is to be able to share the entire world without heavy narrative or fight control that would be a barrier. And we just let you enjoy the entire world, but keeping the interactivity of the game, which is, I think, very important for such a tool. So in addition to explore the entire world, we decided to add more than 75 tours that are thematically framed. Most of the tours will be about the architecture, the people, the way of life. But we have also very specific stations that are clearly identified, where we will try to tell more about our development process so that people understand a bit better the development of video games.
With the Discovery Tour, we can be proactive about the information that we give, understanding that sometimes it's just artistic liberty, where we raised a little bit the pyramids so that you see them from afar. But the dimensions of the pyramid are actually true, and the way that we build it is actually based on all the knowledge that we have at the moment. Very early on, we knew that something that was interesting was to have external point of view on what we're doing. So to have a scientist and his team doing an external research on our product is great.
On est celui qui décide de ce qu'on fait, on pense, donc on est impliqué dans l'action, on est engagé. En plus de l'être parce que c'est intéressant et beau, on est engagé parce qu'on doit prendre des décisions. Et si on regarde tous les détails, si on a quelqu'un qui nous guide pour les voir en plus, on maximise l'apprentissage. Ça veut dire qu'un élève laissé à lui-même, à la maison, en faisant le tour guidé, apprendrait beaucoup de choses, sans même se faire dire « tu dois apprendre ceci », là.
They reconstructed a world that doesn't exist anymore. Because when we teach, we try to help them to be immersed in that kind of environment, but to see it at the same time. That's something brand new for the teachers and really helpful, because students, I think, will remember more what we teach if they can feel it.
We are really here to say, you know what, video games can bring more than pure entertainment. I'm really happy about the quantity and the quality of things that we're bringing to the people so that they can actually enjoy and really learn about ancient Egypt.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so it's really fascinating how much they put into the Discovery Tour, but honestly, they had already done this. They had already done the research when they created the game. And so they're just showing how they did the research. And so now let's go to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And for Odyssey, the way that it was done was they had already started making the Discovery Tour for Origins as early as 2016. And so they already knew when they were making Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they're probably going to have to make a discovery tour for this one too. And the thing about Ubisoft is that they want to put out a new Assassin's Creed every year. I think they're starting to get a bit fatigued finally. But so there's multiple games going on at the same time. Since it takes, 6 years to make a game, they already have different branches doing a different game. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey was assigned to the Montreal branch of Ubisoft. And they hired an actual PhD with ancient languages and literature, who spoke French because Montreal, and knew Greece very well. And she showed them around Greece. Ubisoft actually flew a bunch of their developers to Greece. I know, this is like the dream, guys. Flew them there so that they could get a first-hand experience with the setting of Greece, which is just an amazing investment, first of all, but second of all, commitment. They met Dr. Stephanie Ann Rudata, and as she was showing them around, and they hired her as the historian and consultant for them for 2 years while they were creating the game. And again, her name is Stephanie Ann Ruada, and it's interesting because I feel like she might be an inspiration for Cassandra, one of the characters that you could play, but I have no confirmation of this. But this is not a unique move on Ubisoft's part to hire a consultant, right? Consultants are called in all the time on movies, video games, anything. So, but to have one devoted for 2 years is something that's really fascinating, and something that would be basically a dream come true for any archaeologist, providing developers with the materials and resources that you've been studying your whole life, and showing them that aspect. As your professors know, part of learning classics is learning how to access classics. How to access not just the language, the ancient Greek language or the Latin language, but how to access just the years and years and years of research that have been going on. Where to find that? Which source is a good source? Is this one outdated? Is it not? Get someone who's been studying it and who knows it to tell you and sift through all that information for you. And that's what Ubisoft did. So it's refreshing to see a game that makes such good use of the archaeological evidence that's been written about and useful for almost 150 years now piled into this game. And I'll show you an example in a little bit. But in fact, Dr. Ruada was interviewed by another archaeologist, Dr. Andrew Reinhardt, in 2018, and she basically said this to him. Ancient authors such as Aristophanes, Herodotus, Thucydides, and Pausanias were all pressed into service and filtered through a critical and scholarly understanding. Reports and plans from the schools of archaeology, the EFA, which is the French school, the ASCSA, which is the American school, and the BSA, and so forth. The BSA is the British school. Help the team recreate monuments and situate themselves in their virtual world. And that is one aspect of this that's, I think, very important for video game development, to have that orientation. So these schools of archaeology that Dr. Ruada mentioned are all based in Greece. They house scholars from their respective home countries and allow them to conduct research and archaeological work in Greece. Many of them have their own long-standing excavations as well. For example, Delphi is under the jurisdiction of the French. The Agora in Athens is under study of the American school. The BSA, the British school, has Knossos. The Germans have Olympia, and so on and so forth, right? And so that sort of division of scholarship in the field creates another barrier for students of the field. So by using the sources that all these different people are using, she's got to translate for them not just ancient Greek and Latin, but also French, German, English, and what modern Greek. So this is why we tell you, gotta learn your languages, guys, because it's an interesting field and very, very detailed. So I appreciate this game for many reasons, but one of them is to see the things that I saw in my undergraduate career and through graduate school really come to life. Because these were the things that I had been studying and then were put up here. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey, a year after the game came out, released the Discovery Tour for Odyssey, which I was very excited that they were doing. And it's set in Greece, again, with 30 tours in 5 different categories that you can see here. Politics and philosophy, daily life, famous cities, battles and wars, and art, religion, and myth. And these are just a treasure trove of information. You can dig through these for hours and find different sources and resources that would lead you to further avenues of research and exciting, developments. For example, the tour on wine, in that one you can learn about, so this is one of those daily life ones. In that tour, you can learn about the amphorae, how they traveled. The amphorae are the things that carried the wine themselves, those big jars. And you can learn about the handles and how the handles some of them have stamps on them and what those stamps mean. And then you'll get information about where it came from and all of that really, really fascinating stuff. So it's fascinating to me because normally as an archaeologist, I would have to sit down and pull out a bunch of books and scramble through the sources and hope I find the correct one or the most up-to-date one, and then process that information in a way that's accessible for my students or for publications. However, Assassin's Creed Odyssey eliminates that step and really makes this game quite priceless. So like I said, these tours are divided thematically. Democracy of Athens is one tour in particular that we'll kind of look through. I am going to talk over it, or at least try to. No! Oh man, maybe I'm not. Alas. Well. Okay. Hold on. I think I know where it is. Maybe. Give me a sec. Nope. Alright, well, we might just skip it. Maybe. I really don't want to, though. Alright, well, we'll just have to skip it. Anyways, that's fine. So, in this one, though, maybe if I can move, there we go. So, in that tour that you would have taken, you go to the Pnyx, and one thing that I found really fascinating and loved as well is that as you're going through this tour, you're being led by a woman named Aspasia, who is historically Pericles' concubine, girlfriend, something, courtesan kind of person, which is lovely. One, we have female representation in a video game. Two, we have a woman who is very well educated from what our historical sources tell us. Is a very good standing. She's just not a citizen of Athens and therefore couldn't be considered a wife to pass down legitimate heirs. And so she's a concubine of Pericles. Her children actually get made full citizens. Her children with Pericles get made into full citizens of Athens honorarily because Pericles dies and has no other heirs. So, so they get their origins that way. But my reason for telling you this is in the tour, they are voiced by, all these characters are voiced by actual Greek voice actors, modern Greek voice actors. And so they pronounce everything in the modern Greek pronunciation. And for Aspasia, it's Aspasia. And so it's very nice to kind of get that they are very clearly Greek. It's not someone trying to be Greek. And with that American, they actually went out and got Greek actors to read the lines and do the things, and it's a beautiful tribute, I think, and a gift really to hear the modern Greek pronunciations of these names, but also to get the voice of the people who have lived around this stuff, who currently live around this stuff, who have lived around this stuff their entire lives, tell the story of this in their own voice. And so I would normally let you, listen to it, but you can probably find a bunch of it on YouTube, I'm sure. So Aspasia takes us around on this tour of the Pnyx, which is where the assembly of Athens met. And they give us a lot of information about it. They tell us, that the site is from someone who... Oh, perfect, thank you. It's in the chat. So they tell us that this is this is a place where it got its origin of name, is that it might mean like crowded. And so you have interesting stuff there too, right? And so what I want to show you now, though, now that we've kind of talked a little bit about what a tour is like, even though you can see it on your own in the link, in addition to getting some of these things, you would get, as well, you can click through the tour and see photos, archaeological photos, drawings, paintings. You get to see close-up shots of artifacts. And it's a great way that they found to make use of all the research that they already had to do to make this a believable world. They already did this work, they had Dr. Ruada there, and now they just show it off through the Discovery Tour. So to show you how this factors into my understanding as an archaeologist and my appreciation as an archaeologist, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Athenian Agora. So this Agora, so in the Agora, there's a bunch of buildings, of course, over time. This is like the heart of ancient Athens. And one building in particular has always been a favorite of mine. It's the Painted Stoa, also called the Stoa Poikile. And it's up there in red on the map. It was built in 475 to 460 BCE. It's on the north side of the Agora on the Panathenaic Way. It's about 48 meters long. And it was decorated with paintings by Mycon, Polygnotos, and many others. Hence why it's called the Painted Stoa, because this was kind of like our first art museum in a way, but in a stoa, in a porched thing. And we know that these scenes were depicted, we know what they depicted thanks to a guy named Pausanias, who in like 100 CE wandered around Athens and the rest of Greece and wrote down things that he saw for Romans. And so he told us that these scenes that were on the Stoa Poikile depicted the Trojan War, the Amazonamiki, Battle of Marathon, battle against the Spartans at Oinoe. And yeah, you can read this today, and that's great, except we don't have those paintings anymore. Sadly, they were removed by a Roman around 400 CE who just walked away with them. Never to be heard from again, never to be seen again, sadly. So Pausanias saw them, and told us about them, but no one else gets a look after that. We also know there's other decorations as well, looted armor from Spartans, for example, so those technically shouldn't be in the game because that hasn't happened yet, but it's okay. And we do know that this building actually exists because we found it. It was discovered in 2001 and is still being excavated to this day. So we can reconstruct some part of this, right? And so normally in class, I'd be talking about this. I'd show you some images. I'd show you this plan. Great, wonderful. Maybe, it was here. And then the Amazonamiki, the fight with the Amazons was here. The Iliopursis, or the fall of Troy, was here. Great. And I might even, if I felt like finding the research, dig in and find Robert's reconstruction, hypothetical reconstruction, of this painting of the Battle of Marathon. It's his reconstruction on what he thinks it would have looked like at the Stoa Poikile in Athens. And you can see some really interesting things as well as the gods up top. Wonderful. And maybe if you're even luckier, you can afford to go to Greece and travel and it's not COVID, and you can go there and you can see where they're excavating. But all of those are huge maybes and huge obstacles for anyone. And this is actually, the corner of it is right here. The corner of the Stoa Poikile is right here. They had to tear down a bunch of modern buildings, as you can see, in order to get to it. But yeah, it's a fascinating site. But if you can't do that stuff, then how about you do this instead? Let's just wander around the actual site. So this is me running around in the game, in the Discovery Tour mode. And what's very cool is because I've lived in Greece, I know where this is, and I could tell you where the Stoa Poikile is in relationship to it. And it works out almost 1-to-1 really well that I'm, okay, here at the altar of the 12 gods. And you can see this altar, it gives you information on the altar, and what altars were around, what an altar looked like at the very least, and tells you a little bit about the altar that was there, who dedicated it, when it was built, why this site is important. Wonderful. And so that's one aspect that is really very fun. They throw in all information on sizes and everything, and then you can continue. And like I said, you have to picture the building in your head. Well, you have to picture all of this, walk around, and then know, lo and behold, yes, here it is. This is the Stoa Poikile. It's right next to the altar of the 12 gods. And what is even better is I don't have to look at it in the map that you saw before, in the plan that you saw before. I can now see it in its full reconstruction, which I wouldn't even see if I was in Greece today, because it's just the stylobate, or the foundations that are left for us today. So Pausanias has this description, and that's fine, but it's in Greek and it's been translated and it's a little stiff. Now I've got this instead, and I can tour it and I can see some elements that I wouldn't normally get to, like the painting on the actual architectural elements. So that is a fascinating thing to me. But then you go inside, and lo and behold, now we've got all of the paintings. And if you look closely, these paintings are in fact inspired by Robert's reconstruction that I showed you in that earlier slide. So they've actually recreated the whole thing, which is really fascinating, again, for me. So, the Stoa Poikile, we do know that it had several paintings. They were more like wooden panels, and here they're showing them kind of as wallpaper. But if you look close at those things, like I just did, let's go back here. So to this one. So here's Robert's reconstruction, and this is actually his reconstruction of the Nicaea, which is the underworld scene, at the Lecce of the Cnidians at Delphi. So we're in the wrong spot, technically. But nevertheless, look at the Stoa Poikile's reconstruction. It's exactly the same. You have your guy here, you have these two mains here, this tree in the way. Like, this is like copyright material. Like, this is plagiarism to an extreme. But it's great. The reason why this is here and not in Delphi, well, is quite clear. They can't make everything 100% accurate. If you've played the game, you know you can go to the Parthenon, but you're not going to see the exact pediments that were there on the temple and recreated. You're just not going to do that. And instead, you'll see that same pediment repeated on all the temples. Well, it's their way of saving some time and some humanity. And also frame rate. The games would be slowed down entirely way too much if it had all of that data to get through. So they understand that they can't make these games 100% accurate because that's really time consuming. But what they can do is pick their battles and figure out, well, let's at least have some accuracy to our inaccuracy. And that is one effort that they've made that I really appreciate. So basically only scholars are going to know the difference. Only, classicists that have been sitting here and studying this stuff would be like, that's supposed to be at Delphi, not at Athens. And to those people I say, pah. I think it's just nice to have this here. Now, yes, there are other inaccuracies. If you went through there, you may be caught that there's no central colonnade there. There's no central colonnade in the Stoa Poikile. Sure. And all of this is like wallpaper rather than panels. Okay. But again, Ubisoft is not here to make it 100% accurate. They need to sacrifice some time, some space, some money. But, very quickly, here I want to show you this one, the Discovery Mode Manager that is actually given to instructors who contact Ubisoft and say, hey, I want to use your game in the classroom. They'll give you a bunch of information, and lo and behold, here it is, the Battle of Marathon as recreated by Roberts, so that you can see. This is like one of those things that would have been there, a reconstruction that would have been there for us. And so for that reason, I really appreciate this game. All of that is to say, I'm going to just zip through really quickly, that this doesn't mean that there's not some elements that are just over sensationalized. The Monument of the Eponymous Heroes is one of them. You can see here, like, this is how tall it would be. Here's a person. Okay, so they're a little bit larger than life size. But when you get into the game, they're huge. And this is the Hollywood aspect of it that is a little sensationalized and is here because, not because they made a mistake, but because of the monumentality of Hollywood in general and the expectation of us, the players. Our expectations are that these are going to be big and larger than life and elaborately decorated and all this beautiful stuff to it. But what you see instead, and so what you see is something like this, that was not an existing actual thing. The reason, however, again, is because of perceived objects, a perceived perception of the past. So this Athena Promachos statue standing here, looking over the Propylaea at the Athenian Acropolis, would never have been that big. Here it is here. Again, never would have been that big, but we have it this large regardless. The little things about Assassin's Creed that I like, you get little facts on the load screen about different things, military training for kids, so while you're waiting for the enormous long load screen, you get to see something. Additionally, the depictions of daily life in the game are throughout. Picking olives, you have smelting and statue making facilities, so you get those daily life elements that you normally wouldn't. I got to see, potter's shops and potter's ware for sale at a Stoa. I got to see a potter making a pot, right? And painting a pot. Things that you just don't get the opportunity to do in the real world today. And that was a fascinating thing for me to see, is just the daily life and everything. And as you're going around in the tour, it pops up cool little elements showing you ancient objects as well. And so here's one of those. So I hope that you guys have kind of gotten a little bit of an understanding of why I appreciate this game so much. The last thing I want to say is just that I appreciate this game more than anything because of its ability to help me debunk aliens. I know I started with this talking about the Isu and the aliens, but this game has really helped me debunk that and turn that off and say, look, these are real people living in the real past, and these are things that we can study. And so my project was, before COVID, was to turn a classroom into a gaming classroom. And I had the opportunity to do that with the University of Iowa's Innovations in Teaching with Technology Award. And so you can see we have the games there and everyone could play hypothetically. The sad part was that it was right before COVID, and so I have not gotten to use these. We tried to use them in the classroom as a first-year seminar, and it just didn't work, and we had to go online because of COVID. But it was still a really great experience. The students ended up playing a little bit. You can kind of see it here.
But you're going to talk to a woman named Aspasia. Aspasia.
And they had a really good time, and it was really fun, but we had to cut it pretty quick, pretty fast. My students, as a result of playing this game, even said that they were interested by the depictions of things that you just don't hear about, like women. So this student had said, although I did enjoy the information that was given, it also aligns with the fact that much of the information on women's lives, especially the lives of lower class women, is not known. As was said in the beginning of class, that's with me. So I would lecture ahead of time, and then they would play the game. And women were not the focus in ancient texts. And so it was nice to have the things that I've been telling them reinforced in the game so that they know I'm a reliable source, just like the game is a reliable source. I even had students do presentations if they wanted to so they had to make their own discovery tour. And so I had students make some really fascinating ones. They didn't do the game themselves. But they did show here's what I would do if we were doing this sort of thing. If we could make the game and make a tour, it would be in this. And so they had weapons in Athens as opposed to weapons in Sparta. And so it was a cool way for them to make their own tour. So it was a great bonding opportunity for them because they worked as teams. It was a popular class. It reached potential majors. Actually, I think 3 of them ended up becoming majors out of the 15 that were in the class. It made use of pre-existing technology on campus, and it added to it the Xboxes, and then highlighted daily life and aspects of Greece. But more than anything, it exposed the students to the primary sources, and I ended up getting students enrolling in Latin and Greek as a result. So it was really a great thing. However, it is not practical if you are in the middle of a pandemic, and it is not easy to do on Zoom. So those are the things that I would caution against if anyone ever tries to do a class like that. Nevertheless, they actually liked reading the ancient Greek texts and translation, and any class, any opportunity to get students to read more of the ancient stuff is a win for me. So needless to say, I do have future plans for this, including Twitch and YouTube channels, which are out there and fully available. But hopefully I will see you guys on there. This is me and my friend Francis doing some tours together and having a good time. So all of that is to say, thank you all so much for this. I am really, really happy. Sorry I had to rush through that last part. I just got super excited about geeking out with you on Stoa Poikile and stuff like that. So thank you all. I really appreciate this opportunity.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Deb. Tyson, I'm going to pass it over to you if there's any for Q&A moment. Deb, if you have a few moments for questions, we don't want to monopolize your time.
No. Questions would be great.
Fantastic. So we have one in the chat, and we have a few coming up here as well. The first one that I'm seeing so far, there was somebody that had to leave just moments before the end of your talk, before you were in the Agora. But their question was about how clean things looked in the reconstruction and whether that might be something that is explained somewhere or it might unduly affect people's interpretations about what antiquity looked like.
Yeah, they did. There are some dirty parts. There are some dirty parts, that's for sure. Like right here, you've got like this, there are some definitely dirty parts. However, if we go back to, so you do have these kind of more organized worlds, I think, than what we would have normally seen. So you have an area that is definitely like they're only doing this one task here, and they're only doing this one task here. And I think that's to orient the player a little better. And and not make things too cluttered and too lost for them. Especially in the game itself, when you're trying to find a certain object or a certain thing, you want that to stand out. And so that may be one aspect to it. Nevertheless, some of these things, yes, are very clean. If we go back to like the altars themselves, which would have been covered in ash and dirt, it would be nice to see a little bit more realism there. However, if you do go to Olympia in the tour, they have a giant ash altar at Olympia that you can walk up and explore. So hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. That was a great response. Thank you so much. The chats, there's some excitement about about the questions here. So bouncing around here with this. There is a thank you here, and I'll read it out. This is a great question. Thank you about the wonderful talk. I also wanted to mention that Ubisoft is facing allegations from its employees of institutionalized sexual harassment, including the Montreal studio that developed Assassin's Creed Odyssey. There's a link there in the chats for people to check that out. As an academic, what ethical responsibility do we bear when teaching and disseminating the products of multinational publishers like Ubisoft? How important is the context of a game's production to its meaning and impact?
Yes, definitely. I think this is... So I was thinking about this actually yesterday when it's difficult for me to praise a game when not only are there allegations of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, but also in general, video games companies are notorious for avoiding labor issues and banning unionized labor. Unions are a really hard thing to organize, and sadly, it's one of those kind of growing pains, I think, of an industry that originally was not seen as important and then got really popular really fast. We see it with movies in the 40s and 50s, stories of actresses, even till today still, actresses having to deal with assault, long work hours by employees, and just this institutionalized racism, sexism, everything. It's not to say that that's okay. It's just saying that they didn't have or understand the importance of these practices. And I think video games is going through the same thing that movies did back in the 40s and 50s. I think they will eventually be able to make progress, but it's not uncommon for people to hear that people worked on the video game endless hours, no extra pay, no rest, no breaks, and that is disturbing. That is disturbing things, especially when you're trying to come out with stuff for us every year, which Ubisoft we're not asking for. Okay, just calm down. It's okay to have it every 2 years, guys, and if that means more respect for the people in the industry, then I fully support it. But sadly, it's a fast-growing field, and people are eager to compete and abuse workers before thinking about others. So, yeah, it's a sad thing. I think it's something that can be brought up, for sure. I often bring up looting in my classroom on archaeology, for example. So I think this can be something that you bring up in the classroom as let's not hide this issue, let's talk about this issue. The fact that very few women are involved in video game creation is another one. Female gamers on Twitch are only starting to get common now, but it's a difficult arena to break into at times. So.
Great, thank you. We do have our colleague, Dr. Hansen, who would also like to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Tyson. And thanks, Deb, for a very interesting talk. I was really glad to see some of this Discovery Tour stuff. This is all totally new to me. In fact, Odyssey and Origins are both new to me, besides the reputation. So I can't speak from a deep source of knowledge. I did play some of the earlier Assassin's Creed games, and was interested to hear your discussion of the Animus briefly at the beginning as kind of a way of fixing the relationship between the player and the relationship to historical events. Precisely because I thought of it as not like as a fix per se, but rather as a way of integrating the player into deep conditions of the difficulty of writing history, as a kind of remembering history, especially as the character comes to understand their own role enmeshed in a larger conspiracy about power, and using history as a way of attempting to gain access to some sort of power that hadn't been had elsewhere. It's an unfixing of the relationship between the player and history. And that's, that a longer conversation could be had there that would be really interesting, and I would love to have that conversation. But it raises a question for me about how you use these games in the classroom, which is to say, the Discovery Tour seems to have a strong emphasis, and as an archaeologist, this makes a lot of sense, on the material culture, engaging with it, seeing it. But I'm interested in the degree to which the thematics, the themes of the games remain in the Discovery Tour. If they don't, do you have them play the games in order to encounter these themes? And to the degree to which these themes can be put into conversation with other texts, primary, secondary, as ways of helping students kind of deepen that understanding of the historiographic relationship between, contemporary time, memory, history, power, all these things that I think the Assassin's Creed games do so well in kind of staging a type of history for its players.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Wes. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really do love the idea of the Animus itself. It's just something that I hope comes true one day, honestly, but then it'll put me out of a job. So yeah, that idea of memory and the past, and really understanding bias really is what it gets down to. Is something that I do try and emphasize in the class. It can get lost in the tour. And so one thing that I will often do is have the students read Pausanias, or some other author that was there, and we say, okay, if this was our only source, this was the only thing we had, how would you reconstruct it? And so I teach it before they even play the tour, and ask them, what are your current observations? What are your current preconceptions before you go in and see this tour? What are you expecting? So they do this before class starts. They do the reading, and then they submit this assignment, and then they get to play the game, the tour in class with their teammates. And I think that helps frame it a little bit more and preserve that aspect of, you need to think of your own biases that we have today, then the biases that we have created from the past and what's left of the past. And then at the end of the class period, they're then required to write a brief reflection on how have my views changed based on this depiction, and how might they change further if I had some other piece of evidence. And so I think in that way, if you can find the assignment to get the goal, you're pretty good. And mine was to make sure that they understood there are preconceptions of the past, and now we're hopefully breaking those down. I did feature a lot of women in my talks as well, because I appreciated that they had Aspasia and Cassandra as options. And so we did do a whole day on ancient women in Greece. And I did show them, we just don't have a lot. We don't know. And they appreciated that honesty, I think, as well. I don't know if I would have students play the game itself, only because it's so very long. There are aspects that I'm like, it would be fun if we could do the Caledonian boar hunt and do these one little things, but to get them to that part would take so long that I just haven't been able to justify it. Shorter games I could do, but Assassin's Creed Odyssey. All the Assassin's Creeds are just so epic.
That was fantastic. Thanks again. We have a question from a student who is wondering about your experience traveling in Athens, if that helped you at all with the gameplay, being able to sort of locate yourself physically in that space.
Actually, it did. Because I kept picturing, okay, where is the Starbucks? I know there's a Starbucks in the area. Where would that be? And then that's how I know where the Agora is, sadly. So yeah, there were moments of, this is where this would be, because I know it's there in antiquity. And that's a fun way to interact with it, I think. So I do take students to Greece in the summer when it's not COVID. And we walk around all of Athens together. And I have had students that are like, oh, I remember this thing from Assassin's Creed. It's not as big as it was, but I do remember that. So it's nice to see the opposite effect as well. Not just see me playing the game and being like, where is this in modern Athens? But then having the students who have played the game and know the game better than I could ever know it come to Athens and go, oh, it's over there. So it's a mind-bending experience.
It would be cool to have some sort of a skin that you could put on so it shows what the ancient world, mapped against the modern world would look like, because it would be, well, I guess...
No, that would be fascinating to have, like, someone on Twitch maybe playing the game and me walking around in Athens at the same time with a GoPro or something. That could be cool.
That would be incredible, yeah.
We should set that up. Let's talk.
Absolutely. We have another one. This is sort of in line with the concept of a game as text. Do you see the game as an easy entryway into classics to get students interested enough to read Thucydides et al., or as a fun accompaniment to the real work of reading the sources themselves?
Both, I think. Like I kind of mentioned, my students in this first year seminar, I had, how many of them? I feel like I had 18, and 3 declared a major. I think 2 are doing Latin and love it. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to see if it's that early access, freshman year, first thing they're doing is they're here with me in the classroom and we're playing Assassin's Creed, how it affects, the rest of their time at the university, but also the rest of their lives. So it's a very humble experience, for sure. But it has definitely made students more interested if you have the right way to access it and not just play around on your own, but actually understand. And I think the Discovery Tour is the perfect medium for that. Otherwise, you just have someone playing a game and not knowing what they're seeing. It's like going on vacation somewhere and not knowing why this building is important, and you don't appreciate it as much. It's kind of the same, oddly enough. So I think if you can get an instructor or someone who's willing to slow down the game and say, that's like this, it can be a really valuable experience for sure.
And that's great. And just reading in the comments there as well about that relationships between sort of the deep reading of text and then the exposure to video games as well. Question about the GoPro perhaps for experiments in summer of 2022. From another one of our
I'm going to be in Athens. I'll let you know.
Fantastic. If I may arrogate as a partial host here to ask a question myself, this is from chatting with a friend of mine who was a classicist, or I guess he was a game designer, then sort of got into classics and went back to game design. And for a while, like he had this skill set, but when he went to the video game company to implement that, they're like, no, we have like our own way of doing Latin, and it's just basically our Latin and not actual Latin. Is there, and thinking back to like early Assassin's Creed, which I played, which is in a sort of like side-scrollery more than anything else, some of it at least.
Yeah.
Is there like a reason? Was it just that they had technology now that they could scale things up in an impressive, realistic way? Or is it that they found it marketable perhaps to have these teaching or teachable segments to it? So they did it more or less because they could?
Maybe, trying to think of earlier games that had an equal amount of impressive work to them. I was just playing one game. It was like a text-based game that was really fascinating, and they did a ton of research for it. It was early on, though, and was not well, like, distributed from what I can tell. But yeah, that's the thing, is that it's like, well, you're sacrificing... You have to find this balance, right, between education, and it's too educational, and not fun, and then too fun, no education at all. And you've got to kind of balance this out. And so that's a tricky balance. You've also got to balance their perception, the audience's perception of the past and the truth of the past. You can't have too much truth and you can't have too much audience perception. So that balancing act there also is just a very difficult thing to do. It's fascinating, though, to me to watch game developers come out with all of these different ideas and things. And I'm actually doing an independent study right now with a student who wants to go into the narrative part of game design. And so we often talk about, well, you have to think about, what is this game gonna do? And then, what do I want my players to do? And then, how can I make the story relate to how they're going to play it, but also how they're going to relate to the myth? So I have an example of a game that does a terrible job of this. It's called The Next Penelope. It's a terrible game. I'm sorry if any of you have played it and love it, but it's a terrible game. And the reason is that they have Penelope, who is Odysseus's wife, captaining a spaceship and racing around in her spaceship in races. Like, the thing about Penelope is that she is stagnant. That's the thing about her that makes her such a good... She's stuck. She's the one that can't move. Odysseus is the one and it frustrated me to no end. If you want to have a racing game set in myth, then go for something like Atalanta. Or, oh god, there's so many other, like, just chases. If you really want to go, like, like an anti-sexual assault kind of one, you could do, like, Daphne and Apollo racing, like, and have Daphne win, finally. Or anything like that. That would be... They just wanted to throw a feminist version in there, and they wanted to have a racing game, and none of that made sense. I'll have to think about, like, games that have that monumentality, though. I think part of it might be because, you know, they just... Yeah, like you said, they have the ability to do it, so why not do it?
I think back to, like, the early Tomb Raiders, which I was all about, that just sort of scaled things so oddly, but it was just amazing in its massiveness, and that sort of blew me away. But that was sort of scale at the expense of reality, versus what's going on here. Perhaps just looking at the time, if you're able to hang on a bit more, Dr. Trusty, we have this great one. So the student's writing here that this is when the game was released, parallels just when they were taking their first ancient Greek history course, and playing the events was profoundly helpful in reinforcing my knowledge for the class. However, I always wondered if the fictional aspects of the game would have hindered my historical knowledge had I played the game without receiving the historical information in tandem. Do you think that there are any drawbacks to playing the game without the purely historical contextual information?
I think, yeah, it's so hard. I'm so biased because I went into this with not all of the knowledge. You can never have all of the knowledge, but so much of the knowledge of like, I know what this is going to be. And then I watch it happening. And I think it's a game that is good advertising for classics, for sure. I have had a lot of students who had no previous experience with anything and then went back to the game again and were like, oh, now this makes much more sense. And so it seems like a bummer that you would play through this whole very long game and not understand some parts of it. I, by the way, still haven't finished the game. I got to the part where they basically ruin everything because I'm just not going to go there. But I won't spoil it, but you probably know where it is. I stopped there. That's where I stopped.
We have one more. This is sort of on the horizon for Ubisoft, perhaps. Do you think that they would ever make an Assassin's Creed Roman version, I suppose, other than Roman Egypt?
I wondered that. There's always speculation. Where are they going to go next? And right now, like, Norse myths are super huge, partly because of Loki and Marvel and all of that, and partly because of God of War. But God of War I feel like all of these games are going from Greece up to Norway now, and so I don't know where they'll end up next. Maybe Rome. It would be interesting to see what that would be like, but I feel like they are so forward-thinking at times that they're going to do something set in maybe Asia or the Near East before they go back to Rome. I feel like that has been one area that they've been neglecting, and with the rise in issues of like hate crimes against Asians, I can feel like that's a prime real estate for them to kind of bring a new bias to light more. I'd also love to see something in like below Egypt, Africa. Those are areas that are understudied in academia, let alone by video games, and so I would prefer that they go somewhere new. But it's not to say that they shouldn't also do Rome. Just one day.
I would love to see all of those games. I think I should definitely pitch that to Ubisoft.
If ever I have contacts there again.
Very, very playable. It's fantastic. Well, it remains for me then, Dr. Trusty, to thank you so very much for this amazing lecture. I learned so much, and beyond anything else, I now have some solid case for upgrading my computer system to getting all of these games. An absolute delight, and please join me, everyone, who I thank as well, for such a great talk, and we will be in touch soon. So take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me, everyone. I really appreciate it.